The United Nations Security Council held a special session on the situation in the Middle East following the bombing of 3 Iranian nuclear facilities by the United States. In Palestine, food distribution workers in the Sinkim area of the Gaza Strip face threats of arrest and violence by Israel. And on Sunday in Syria, a suicide bomber targeted the Mar Elias Greek Orthodox Church in Damascus, killing 20 people and injuring at least 52 others. Hello and welcome to From the South, from the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. My name is Pablo Micheliche. We begin with the news. Stay with us. The United Nations Security Council held a special session on the situation in the Middle East following the airstrikes carried out by the United States on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. At the Council, China condemned the attacks against Iran and the bombing of nuclear facilities, which violate the UN Charter and undermine the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They called for an immediate ceasefire, particularly from Israel. Russia also condemned the U.S. actions, which it described as irresponsible against a sovereign state of the United Nations, accusing the U.S. of opening Pandora's box, ignoring all the IAEA warnings about the global repercussions. For his part, the U.S. representative continued Trump's threat of new deadly attacks, and Iran stressed that their allegations were baseless.
While the representative of the United States continues to make baseless accusations against Iran, the international community is well aware of the well-documented and dark record of military intervention, illegal use of force against other sovereign states, and sponsorship of terrorism by the United States in the Middle East and across the world. The facts speak for themselves. All U.S. allegations against Iran are unfounded, with no legal basis and politically motivated.
For his part, the Chinese representative spoke about the new draft resolution he proposed together with Russia and Pakistan.
Russia, China, and Pakistan have proposed a draft resolution calling for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, the protection of civilians, respect for international law, and engaging in dialogue and negotiation. We hope that Council members can demonstrate their strong sense of responsibility by jointly supporting the draft resolution to enable the Security Council to fulfill its responsibilities for the maintenance of international peace and security. China stands ready to work with the international community to foster synergy, uphold justice, and make unremitting efforts to restore peace and stability.
Likewise, the permanent representative of Russia to the UN, Vasily Nebensia, denounced the hypocrisy with which some Council members are reacting to the situation.
They're calling on Iran to exercise restraint. This is something other Council members are doing. We've seen a lot of hypocrisy in this room, but this takes the biscuit. This is a surprising example of hypocrisy on the part of those who, over the last few days, has been whipping up tensions regarding Resolution 2231, which will soon expire. Madam President, throughout the last week, we witnessed a new, highly dangerous wave of escalation. Last night, the situation became wholly unprecedented in nature. The radiological repercussions of the U.S. attacks remain to be assessed, and we're counting on the IAEA and its Director General to issue a clear-cut, professional and impartial analysis of the situation.
And new satellite evidence contradicts U.S. President Donald Trump's statements about nuclear facilities in Iran. The satellite images refuted Trump's claims that his administration had destroyed atomic facilities in Iran. The data revealed that the nuclear infrastructure was not seriously damaged, casting doubt on the U.S. narrative and its policy of maximum pressure against Tehran. On the contrary, the media pointed out that instead of securing a victory, Washington's attacks complicated the possibility of tracing the Iranian. It should be noted that Iran is pursuing atomic development programs with health objectives, contrary to U.S. claims of nuclear weapon production in the Persian nation. In Yemen, the armed forces launched a missile into the territories occupied by the Israeli regime. According to reports from the Islamic Republic News Agency, the 21st wave of the Iranian armed forces Operation True Promise 3 has not been executed. However, sources confirmed that the Houthi movement in Yemen carried out an attack on Zionist strategic targets in the occupied territories as part of its resistance against the U.S. and Zionist military aggression. The Houthis, in their struggle against the occupation, have reiterated their right to self-defense as attacks continue in the region. Venezuela's Culture Minister Ernesto Villegas also condemned the attacks by Israel and more recently by the government of the United States against the peoples of the Middle East, threatening to escalate to nuclear war.
Now, it is truly shameless that in the name of those victims, citing that experience, that they may commit now and even more absurd and irritating aggressions like the ones that occur daily against the Palestinian people. And now they are pushing the world on the brink of a nuclear war and a third world war, invoking what the Jews suffered during the Second World War.
Moreover, Ernesto Villegas highlighted the role of the media in the narrative surrounding war conflicts.
It was an analogical reality. Now, 84 years later, we see this phenomenon exponentially, because now the war that takes place in the field of communication, in the field of narratives, is almost as important as the war that takes place in the battlefield. In fact, narratives have been used to generate war outcomes. Let's recall the Green Square in Tripoli, how a whole scaffolding of falsehoods was set up, what is now called fake news, which are also used as casus belli and as elements to create virtual realities that trigger events in real life.
And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We will be right back, stay with us. Welcome back. In the Gaza Strip, the Hamas resistance movement battled Israeli occupation forces in Tel al-Meitar. Snipers shot down an Israeli soldier east of the Shujaiya neighborhood, east of the city, and shelled Israeli army vehicles positioned there. As part of the Stone of David series of operations, the Al-Aqsam brigades released footage of a complex ambush against Israeli military vehicles on the supply line in the Al-Sana area east of Khan Yunis. According to statistics, more than 42 Israeli soldiers have been killed since early June. In Palestine, food distribution workers in Sikkim area of the Gaza Strip face threats of arrest and violence by the Zionist regime of Israel. Amid bans on entry and distribution of basic supplies, Gazans attend aid centers despite the presence of occupation forces in order to access supplies. It should be noted that Israeli forces keep the border crossings closed and prohibit the entry of international humanitarian aid, leaving thousands of people without access to food and medicine. Meanwhile, the international community continues to press for the opening of humanitarian corridors. And on Sunday, at least 26 Palestinians were detained by the Israeli army in raids in the occupied West Bank. According to witnesses, Israeli troops raided and ransacked homes in camps, causing major damage during the detention of civilians. The Israeli army also raided Burq village, causing destruction of property. Sources say the soldiers also vandalized the Martyrs Monument and pulled down the Hamdallah statue, which has symbolic meaning for all Palestinians. Following his weekly Angelus prayer in the Vatican on Sunday, Pope Leo XIV called on the world not to forget the humanitarian crisis in Gaza as conflict in the Middle East escalated with overnight U.S. strikes on Iran.
Alarming news from the Middle East, especially from Iran, are coming one after the other. In this dramatic scenario that includes Israel and Palestine, the daily suffering of the population risks falling into oblivion, especially in Gaza and the other territories, where the urgency for adequate humanitarian support becomes more and more pressing.
We change topic. On Sunday in Syria, a suicide bomb attacked the Mar Elias Greek Orthodox Church in Damascus, killing 20 people and injured at least 52 others. Witnesses say the man, who may not have acted alone, entered the church, opened a fire, and then detonated his explosive vest. According to Syria's interior minister, the suicide bomber was a member of Daesh, the Islamic State. The Foreign Ministry of Greece issued a statement condemning the attack and demanding Syrian transitional authorities to take immediate action not only to find those responsible, but to implement measures to guarantee the safety of Christian communities and all other religious minorities to allow them to live without fear. The United Nations warned that an escalation of the conflict in Sudan will have deadly consequences for civilians caught in the crossfire. In a recent update on the emergency situation in the northeastern African nation, the Independent International Fact-Finding Mission for Sudan described the situation as a humanitarian crisis, highlighting the increased use of heavy weaponry in populated areas. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees experts, there is a widespread sexual violence, starving children, and blocked humanitarian aid, which has led to a severe humanitarian crisis, large-scale displacement, and a growing number of people in need. Despite the UN arms embargo imposed on Sudan, the mission has collected testimonies and stressed that the conflict continues.
Aid workers are violations of international law.
We move on to Europe. The residents of several buildings in Barcelona denounced the wave of systematic evictions by the same speculative fund. Let's see the details with our correspondent Andrés Flores in Spain.
According to denunciations by the Tenants Union of Barcelona, the company Vander has acquired up to 200 apartments during the last few years. Neighbors are openly denouncing that they are systematically seeking to evict them. The company seeks to create co-living housing, a fashionable trend where common living spaces are temporarily shared. Here we have found that the same fund has bought 14 buildings and is kicking out the neighbors when the contract expires in order to put up co-livings. Then there are blocks where they have already kicked everyone out and there are no neighbors left. Others where there are very few neighbors left, even a single neighbor surrounded by temporary co-livings for foreign students. And other blocks that are still at the beginning and all the neighbors are still there, but the requests to leave when their lease is up are already starting to arrive.
To
learn more about the case, we visited Clara. She lives in one of the apartments they are seeking to evict. I have lived in this house since I was 4 years old. We are a large family. I have 2 younger siblings, and all 3 of us are in school. And we are also a single-parent family, which leaves us in a risky situation if we are evicted from this house. The rents in Barcelona are completely unaffordable. The consequences of the so-called vulture funds in the real estate sector are palpable worldwide. Their vision of housing as a business destroys the possibility for people like Clara to live in dignity in their city. Therefore, if we are kicked out, what is being broken is a family, a neighborhood is being broken, and a city is being broken. In the end, there are 14 buildings affected by this investment fund, and what we have decided to do is to fight together. Clara, like so many others, decides not to give up and fight. Enrique accompanies this movement and affirms that the state must take urgent measures.
Aquí lo que pasa es que en Cataluña hay un tope en el precio del alquiler. No te
Here
ponen-
what happens is that in Catalonia there is a ceiling on the price of rent. They cannot raise the rent, but they can put other figures such as a temporary rental or a room rental, which has no limits. And this generates an incentive to kick out tenants who live there and implement this type of activity. In this sense, we have already said that making this regulation only for one type of rental would generate this problem. Therefore, what must be done urgently is to also regulate the price of seasonal rentals rooms and even limit the possibility of this use.
Limitar la posibilidad de hacer este uso.
Sin medidas contundentes desde el Ejecutivo.
Without strong measures from the executive, situations like those experienced by Clara will continue to be repeated.
Andrés Flores, TeleSUR, Barcelona.
And we have a second short break coming up before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you will be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Financial break, don't go away. Welcome back. At least 12 people were killed and 18 injured in a bombing in Borno State in Nigeria. According to local news reports, the incident happened after a woman in a popular market in the country's northeast set off a detonator while carrying explosive charges on her body. The victims were transported to nearby medical facilities, many of whom were in critical condition. In this context, it is anticipated that the number of victims will rise. The security forces have mobilized to the disaster area to reportedly stop new attacks from happening and to launch an investigation into the accident. The Uruguayan government proposes a plan to eradicate child labor in view of the worrying figures. Our colleague Mateo Grillet tells us more.
Despite not being at the forefront of the news, child labor in Uruguay continues to be a scourge that needs to be urgently addressed. Thousands of children and adolescents are currently working in conditions that violate their most basic rights, and the issue was raised by the Uruguayan Ministry of Labor. In fact, the data we have is from the 2010 survey, which showed that between 65,000 and 90,000 children and adolescents were working. It is good to point out that a nationwide survey has just been completed and is being processed at the moment. And by the end of June, we will have more accurate data that will allow us to evaluate the real situation in the country and in the world. The new figures are not yet known, but the incidence of child labor is likely to increase, especially after a period of sharply reduced social investment. As soon as we have this survey, we will analyze the situation in Uruguay after the pandemic, after the cutback in public policies, after periods of salary reduction. Therefore, although we are going to wait, in reality we believe that it is a consolidated reality and that we have to face it jointly. But child labor is not just a figure, it is also an expression of structural inequality often naturalized in Uruguayan culture. What are we looking at when we talk about child labor? What are we talking about? What are we understanding? Because in reality we are starting from the premise that there are a lot of activities that are part of our culture as a country, of the way in which we understand that we live in society, in the way we treat our children and adolescents, that we do not necessarily measure the degree of impact they generate, the level of damage they can imply for their development, for their growth, and that go from that place to sexual exploitation or even participation in criminal activities of organized crime. The civil organization CIPUS, which has been working on the issue of child labor for 27 years, is calling for the development of a plan to address the phenomenon in a comprehensive and territorial manner. We have been very concerned for many years, especially about children and adolescents who get involved in illegal economic issues. Uruguay has a rate of deaths due to territorial violence of 11-12 per 100,000, but if we break it down by territory, there are territories where we are at 55 per 100,000. So in these issues of child labor and all this, one has to think about the different realities in different ways.
Las organizaciones civiles alertan por situaciones sociales graves que profundizan el problema.
Civil organizations warn of serious social situations that deepen the problem, such as high student dropout rates, high poverty rates, and low family income. The new government has promised to draw up a national strategic plan to combat child labor that would have 5 lines of action: early warning, institutionalism, training, coordination, and participation. Beyond the statements, the concrete reality imposes itself and demands urgent measures.
Los enunciados, la realidad concreta se impone y exige medidas urgentes. Mateo Grille, TeleSUR, Montevideo, Uruguay.
The great city of Beijing hosted the Moscow 2025 Cultural Festival as a celebration of the relations between China and Russia. Let's see more in the following report.
Un gran evento cultural inundó durante 3 días las calles de la capital china.
A great cultural event flooded the streets of the Chinese capital for 3 days, where various activities were held in commemoration of another year of relations between the two Asian giants. At the festival, Chinese visitors enjoyed the charm of Moscow and its traditions through a vibrant exhibition of Russian art cuisine. Unique shows, performances, and cultural displays, immersing them in an exchange of knowledge and learning more about the neighboring country.
Que los sumergieron en un intercambio de conocimientos y aprendieron más sobre el país vecino.
A través de este festival, nos gustaría mostrarle a
Through this festival, we would like to show our Chinese audience that we are different in terms of culture, but at the same time, we are the same. We all enjoy the fun, the performance, the activities. Everything is created to bring people together, connect people, and make people enjoy the festival.
y hacer que la gente disfrute del festival.
Este acontecimiento cultural también incluyó presentaciones.
This cultural event also included musical and handicraft presentations, discussions, round tables, and a high-level forum between museum directors of both countries. The intention was to deepen cooperation between the various art galleries in order to exploit all the development options in this cultural sector.
Todas las opciones de desarrollo en este sector cultural.
En Moscú, Rusia, aman a China.
In Moscow, Russia, they love China, and they love Chinese culture and like to learn more about it. And we hope that through this festival that we are holding on our city, the inhabitants will also fall in love and become even more interested in learning about the rich Russian culture. And we hope that through this, with the activities at sea, we will further strengthen the bonds between people.
En el mar, fortalezcamos aún más los vínculos entre personas.
El Festival Cultural de Moscú 2025.
The Moscow 2025 Cultural Festival was attended by more than 200 representatives of the city government, companies, and artists from the Russian capital who contributed their talents and knowledge.
Con sus talentos y conocimientos. Asimismo, participaron.
Hundreds of foreign tourists visiting Beijing also participated and took part in dynamic discussions and evaluations, as well as contributed ideas for future cultural exchanges with other nations.
Ideas para futuros intercambios culturales con otras naciones.
And with that story, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And you can also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Pablo Michelice. Thank you for watching.